Sony shuts down Firewalk Studios, Xenoblade Chronicles is back, and I promise there's no stories about Ubisoft for a change. Welcome back to 128 KB News. This is your quick bit of gaming news where we catch up on the world of gaming this week in this short news-like video that's neither short nor news-like. But in massive headline-grabbing news, Ubisoft aren't in this video for once, which must be like the first time in well over a month. So hooray for them for staying out of the headlines for once. But unmistakably, Sony have managed to take their place with talk of Concord yet again, but we'll get on to that. But we're going to jump into the first story straight away. Let's not keep you waiting any longer, and that is, do you remember the day before? It's hard to forget, but let me jog your memory. It was this really cool-looking post-apocalyptic kind of extraction zombie shooter that in all of its trailers looked amazing, and it was opened up to early access on Steam, and they took loads of people's money, and then, well, they released what could only be described as a hot mess and disappeared really quickly. It went from one of the most anticipatedly rated games on Steam to very quickly being utterly ratioed on there. They disappeared, but the developers are back, and yes, with a twist. It seems that Fantastic Studios, which is a great name for a company that made a really bad game, are back and are grabbing the news for all the wrong reasons. They've put out on Discord a nice little competition for people to join in on, and that's to help them design levels for their next game. And the winner of this amazing competition, their prize, will be that their level design will be used in their upcoming game. But of course, that is without any payment at all. So it just kind of sounds like maybe they're just asking the community to help them do the design work for them. Maybe I'm being hyper cynical here. It's possible, it's been known, but with a game company, a development company of that checkered history, maybe I'm right in being cynical. But I guess the chances are there's no need to worry at all because the game probably won't get released. So at least there's that. And from one near-miss disappointment to the next, and that is, of course, Microsoft. Hooray for them being underwhelming, and we are inching one step closer, one day at a time, to finally a big picture mode. And I put a big asterisk there because that's almost clickbait. So it seems like Microsoft are testing a new homepage for the Xbox PC app. It's a bit of a UI overhaul, but it does bring a couple of new features and inches us and teases us one step closer to being what we actually want. And let's face it, that's just an Xbox big picture mode for PC. We're getting there just very slowly. So this new homepage they're testing out features your Game Pass game or content from your Game Pass games, content from the Microsoft Store as well as deals and discounts, and also a jump back in feature, which is something we actually do see on Xbox, which shows you your most recently played games and gives you a quick way of jumping right back into them. Of course, there's no real detailed features in this homepage that they're testing. You can't properly install games or probably not even search your library properly, knowing them, but at least we are getting one step closer. I honestly don't know what's taking them so long to do what everyone is wanting them to do, but of course we're talking about Microsoft and they love to disappoint us. But really we need them to stop teasing us now, especially when we consider how many PC handhelds are out there on the market and how much of a market share this is now becoming. The PC handheld isn't going away, it's only going to get bigger with the success of devices like the Asus ROG Ally X, the Lenovo Legion Go and the likes, and of course them being almost in direct competition with the Steam Deck. We need a proper big picture alternative for PC handhelds, and it's so frustrating that we're not yet there, but maybe this is one step closer. Okay, I'm going to turn the tone to being all serious and legal now. I wish I had a little tie I could put on, maybe pretend I'm in a court, because we're going to talk legal stuff, and that is that the US courts have shut down the pleas from the game preservation societies. Yes, now this is a story that me and Andy talked about in a podcast a long time ago, maybe over a year ago, that the Games History Foundation did a study, a deep study, looking at the history of games, and that over 87% of video games released before 2010 were no longer legally accessible by players, meaning that unless you're willing to play in the grey areas of emulation, let me say, though, just in case Nintendo are listening, I don't want to get in trouble with them, that you have no way of accessing some of these retro games, especially on older and obsolete pieces of hardware. Well, the Games History Foundation took this appeal to the US copyright courts to plea for a change in the DCMA laws to enable players access to these retro games that have no way of being able to legally access them. Well, the US courts have just flat right turned them down. It's a sad day. They say that they're not giving up in their mission to open access to retro games to everyone and to make sure that some of these amazing developments aren't lost to history. But it seems like we are still where we started, and that 87% of games released before 2010 are no longer accessible. It's kind of interesting that sits in the same time frame of Nintendo really ratcheting up how many legal cases they're bringing against people, how much emulation they're shutting down as well. So our access to these retro games is getting harder and harder. And Nintendo, if you're watching, please ignore what's behind me, because this is obviously playing from a Game Boy right now. I promise. I guess we are lucky that there are some legal options when we look at some of the licensed bits of hardware that are on the market. Things like the Evercade that exists, which license some retro games to play on cartridge. And of course, the Analog 3D, which has recently been open to pre-order, which is a new version of the N64, a modern console that can play N64 cartridges. So we are seeing the market coming up with some alternatives and some solutions to this, to some of these great games that we all do want to play still. But it seems like en masse that we're going to lose most of these games, and that retro games are probably just doomed to be lost forever. And talking of being doomed to be lost forever, let's talk about Concord. I mean, only second to Ubisoft stories, Concord is probably my favourite thing to talk about. And of course, if you don't know what Concord is, you've probably been sleeping under a rock or something. It was that massive £400 million development that took Sony like 12,000 years to make for only 25,000 people to buy it. You remember that game? Yeah, it was the arena shooter that no one wanted, no one asked for, and yes, no one bought. Well, finally, we feel like we have the final chapter in this sorry saga, and Sony have closed Firewalk Studios, the development studio that Sony owned that produced Concord. They produced something else as well. Bad smells. Of course, it's no surprise that Sony were going to shut down the studio, disband the studio, and probably disperse this team amongst their other development studios. But it's finally happened, and we have the official confirmation from Firewalk Studios themselves. There was rumours, of course, that Concord may be coming back. We did see on the Steam database that the game was still getting regular updates, even though it had been taken off sale entirely, and in some cases actually been taken off people's hardware remotely. I don't know how they've done that, snuck in there with their copyright ninjas probably. But it does seem like it's not coming back. Those rumours were false. We did hear that it might be a free-to-play version of Concord coming. I think even if it was free-to-play, people still wouldn't install it. It was that bad. Fireworks Studios have put out a tweet signing off for the last time. And they say that Firewalk began with the idea of bringing joy of multiplayer to a larger audience. We did take some risks along the way, marrying aspects of card battlers and fighting games with first-person shooters, and although some of these and other aspects of the IP didn't land as we hoped. I mean, that's probably the understatement of the century. It does seem like with all the literature that's been put out that neither Sony nor Firewalk Studios have really understood what the problem was, that perhaps that it wasn't their lacking development that was actually the issue, because all of the games community, when they first saw the very first trailer for this, all had the same reaction. That was, another arena shooter. We don't need this. We want good new IPs. We want new single-player games. We don't want another multiplayer arena shooter in the market. And they just didn't listen. I don't know if they had their fingers in the ears, or if this is a case of when you try and design a horse by committee and make a camel. But it doesn't seem like they've really understood why it failed. But it failed, and the studio has finally been shut. I guess it's a bit of a sad ending to the story, especially for those people that worked on the game. There's undoubtedly some very talented people in that team that just have the misfortune of working on what could only be described as a hot mess. And let's finish on a positive note, which was probably the most awesome story of the week, which happened entirely by surprise. And that is, of course, that Xenoblade Chronicles X, the definitive edition, is coming to Nintendo Switch. What? And what a shadow drop this was. I didn't see any rumours or talk of this happening. It just kind of happened. There was no build up to it. It was just suddenly there was a trailer on YouTube and a website page on the Nintendo store enabling you to pre-order it. Like, what? Nintendo? What? I mean, that's just the most Nintendo thing to do ever. I fully expect when the Switch 2 gets announced, it will just be a YouTube video that gets dropped on their channel with a trailer for it. No fanfare, nothing, just dropped out of nowhere. But anyway, Xenoblade Chronicles X, if you're unfamiliar with it, is an epic sci-fi kind of JRPG thing. It was released almost 10 years ago, 2015 on the Wii U, and it's been in kind of Wii U jail since then. But finally, we get to play it on the Switch as well, which now I think means we've got all of the Xenoblade games on Switch. I may be wrong in that. But it's exciting, nevertheless, that we get to see this. I actually haven't played this game, yet it looks like exactly the kind of game that I would love to play. So now I have the actual definitive edition access to it. And if you're like me and you've been kind of sat on the fence with it or not have played it at all yet, I think now, finally, there is the definitive way to play it. So definitely jump into it. It does look amazing. It's coming out on 20th of March next year. I think it's a $59.99 release on physical and on digital. Very, very exciting to see this coming to the Switch. And to kind of add to that excitement as well, it is more than just a remastered edition of the game, although it is remastered and it does look very pretty, especially for a Nintendo Switch game. But because it's the definitive edition, there is actually some enhanced elements and some expanded parts to the story that weren't there in the original release of the game. So that's super exciting to see as well. So if you've not played it yet, or maybe if you played it up to, 9-10 years ago, this is the definitive way to jump into it. Awesome to see that Nintendo are still releasing amazing games on the Switch, even right at the end of its life. It's incredible to see how well they've supported this console all the way through its life. Great things to see, and maybe there's even more cool stuff coming before the Switch 2 comes. At this point, it feels like we're not going to see the Switch 2 until the spring of next year. Maybe we won't even get an announcement until next year. Feels like now we're getting too close to Christmas for them to announce a Switch 2 and perhaps cannibalize the sales of the Switch in Christmas time. Who knows? But we're still waiting.
Come on, Nintendo, hurry up already.
Anyway, I'm going mad, talking to myself in the corner of a room again, so it's time for me to leave. But before you go, make sure you leave a comment down below, joining in the conversation, and whilst you're down there digging around, like the video, subscribe to the channel, because I need your validation. It's the only way that I know that you love me. Why wouldn't you love me? What am I saying anymore? And before you leave, consider watching another video from us here at 128KB. We're a lovely bunch and we love you being here. Maybe this one in particular, where me and Andy talk about all things gaming in a slightly slower, calmer way, where we get our words out properly. Now, wouldn't that be a nice thing to hear? So until the next time, I'll probably see you next time. Bye. Feel